Today here at Robert's Guitar Dungeon, we're going to talk about what to look for when buying discounted gear. I posted a video the other day talking about Guitar Center's used gear policies and how all that works. And a viewer commented and thanked me for my insight. And he also asked me if I could do a video regarding what to look for when buying a discounted gear. Now, when we're talking about discounted gear, we're not talking about used gear and we're not talking about stuff that's on sale. We're talking about things like clearance, B-stock, open box, things that have been bought and returned, things of that nature. So I'm going to go through a few points here and talk about what goes on behind the scenes and why some of these items might be marked down as such. In the instance of guitars, guitar players are a fickle bunch. And what I mean by that is so many guitar players are very, very meticulous about every teeny tiny little detail on a guitar. So when you walk into a guitar shop and there's a guitar hanging on the wall that you're interested in and you see that somebody's already bought and returned it, especially in the instance of a new guitar, 90% of the time there's nothing wrong with it. The reason why it was bought and returned was because somebody didn't like the way that they didn't like the way it played, they didn't like the way it sounded, or some little bitty, there's a finish flaw on it of some kind, a little teeny tiny little nuance that doesn't affect the performance of the instrument at all. So oftentimes you're actually able to get, at Guitar Center we used to offer oftentimes a 10% discount on those items just for guitars that were hanging on the wall if we didn't have another one in stock that was in a box. When you look over those things, obviously you want to look for anything, you want to look for the same things that you would always look for regarding buying a guitar. You want to make sure there's no cracks anywhere, particularly around the headstock. You want to make sure there's no fret buzz, you want to make sure the electronics work, that kind of thing, and you want to make sure and plug everything in. Test out all the electronics. Now, so much of the business these days has moved to online. A lot of people won't buy a guitar unless they've gotten a chance to play it first. I get it. I don't personally subscribe to that. I'm okay with buying before I play it, and if I don't like it, most of the online retailers, the Amazons, the Zounds, most of the sellers on Reverb.com, Guitar Center, those places are very good about working through and allowing you to return gear after a certain period of time. Guitar Center's return policy forever was 30 days. I believe here just in the last year or so they actually bumped it back. They bumped it up to 45 days now. Now in the instance of B-stock guitars, that's a little bit different. A B-stock guitar, what that is actually labeled as a B-stock guitar from the manufacturer, meaning that there was a flaw of some kind, and oftentimes it's a finish flaw or something very minor, that they were able to identify before they packaged it up and shipped it out to the retailer. We at Guitar Center used to receive shipments of B-stock guitars from a lot of times they were acoustic guitars. Sometimes we'd get Dean electric guitars that were B-stock, and so many times me and several of the other guys would look over them and we couldn't find a single thing wrong with them. Most of those, I don't know why they would have been considered a B-stock guitar, but regardless, they were being sold at discounted prices. In the instance of Guitar Center anyway, where those guitars are shipped directly from the manufacturer feels that it's still a good enough instrument that they can put it out into circulation and it will still perform up to their standards. There are other instances, Gibson and Epiphone, on the back of their headstock, for when they ship out what's called a B-stock guitar, they will actually imprint on the back of the headstock, usually right below the serial number, the word second. And back in the 70s, they would actually spell it out, S-E-C-O-N-D. Nowadays, they actually stamp 2-ND, second. And what that means is that's a factory second. Again, there is something amiss with that guitar, something that did not meet the standards of the normal A-stock Gibson and Epiphone instruments. Again, I've looked over most of them. All the ones that I've seen, I've never really found anything worth noting that would be worth not buying. Now, in the instance of Gibson and Epiphone, the second guitars are drastically affected on the used market. So if you buy one, you need to make sure that you're getting into it for the right price, because it's not going to resell very well, anywhere near as well as it would if it were an A stock guitar. B stocks are probably going to lose a minimum of 25% of their value on the used market. Clearance guitars are a little bit different, because oftentimes a guitar, there's a few reasons why a guitar would actually go on clearance. Number one, it's a model that has been in stock for a while and it just didn't sell very well, so the store's wanting to move through them in order to make room for a newer model from the same manufacturer. When I was at Guitar Center, it seemed like we turned Ibanez guitars over pretty often. Some of them did really well, and we kept and stocked them for years, and others just flopped. And we would get one in, nobody was interested in it. It would sit there and hang there for a year or two. Finally, we dropped the price on clearance low enough that people, that finally somebody would be interested in it, felt it was a good enough deal, and get it out of there. And then obviously when we were able to do that, then we would get replenished with a newer model of some kind. So, with the things with guitars, some of them sell better than others. Now, in the instance of Gibson of course likes to release a new model of everything every single year now. So Gibson sales get real hot right around this time of year. Right now, all the stores are working real hard to clearance out all the 2017 models. You can get some good deals on 2017 Gibsons right now, because they're trying to roll out all the 2018s. So in that instance, if you find a 2017 Gibson, chances are there's a good chance it's never been touched, and it is virtually a brand new guitar at 50, 60, 75% of the original new price, in a lot of cases lower. I've seen them even lower than that. I saw on Musician's Friend that they were running a stupid deal of the day one day recently, just in the last couple of days, on a 2013 model Gibson that they still have in stock. It was originally about a $1,300 guitar, and I think they were selling it for about $599. So with brands like that, oftentimes even Taylors, Martins, sometimes when they've discontinued a model and they're bringing something else out, that's the reason why you'll find those guitars on clearance. So oftentimes it's the manufacturer's discontinuing it, the retailer isn't going to carry it anymore, or they're coming out with a new version of it. Those are your primary reasons for clearance. Pedals work very, very similarly. The thing with pedals is there's a lot more electronics on the inside that you want to make sure and check out. In my experience, most pedals are generally built pretty sturdy. Unlike a guitar, it's usually not an instance of structural damage of some kind. It's an instance of, it's been discontinued, or somebody, remember, guitar players are fickle human beings. So, an open box item is oftentimes just a matter of, the guy that bought it and returned it just didn't like the sound of it, or it didn't work with his rig, or whatever it might be. It didn't do what he thought it was going to. We've all, any pedal guru like myself, we've all been guilty of that. And those things happen. For an open box pedal, most of the time that's what you're going to run into. B stock, I've never really seen much in the way of B stock pedals. And the reason being is because for the most part, they're really all electronic devices. They have to pass a certain Q&A list and obviously be functional before they're able to leave the factory. If they're not functional and the store discovers it, we would always send them back to the manufacturer so that they could fix it, or at least do the best we could with them. Sometimes a few got through, would get through the cracks, unfortunately. But policy is that if we discover something like that, it needs to go back to the manufacturer. As far as clearance, again, same thing. The store's not going to carry it because it didn't do very well in the store. The manufacturer's going to discontinue it and replace it with something else. One thing, and again, most pedal companies that I've run into built pretty sturdy gear. I mean, think about it. After all, they're designed to be stomped on. There are a few companies out there that the electronics are known to go out on them. Behringer, Digitech, older Digitech anyway. Their new stuff is great, but older Digitech stuff. Those companies in particular are the ones that come to mind. If you're looking at some of their older gear, you want to make sure and test them out before you buy, as best you can. Amplifiers kind of run along the same lines as pedals because, again, they're electronic pieces of equipment. There's a lot of moving parts on the inside of them. The big difference between amps and pedals, at least in the case of tube amps, is if something is sitting on a shelf at a discounted price, and again, be it for B stock or clearance especially, oftentimes it's something as simple as a tube problem, which is very, very fixable, sometimes with just a new set of tubes. I sold a lot of clearance amplifiers that people would be willing to take a chance on a tube amp, because most of the problems that occur on a tube amp are usually tube related. So a lot of people would be willing to take a risk on buying a used or on buying a clearance tube amp in the instance that they were able to retube it and off they go. Most of the time, your odds of that happening are pretty good. Oftentimes, it's something a little bit more involved, and maybe a blown transformer, something of that nature. That's a little bit more involved to repair, and most people aren't going to want to get into that. Sometimes it's as simple as a fuse. That's a very easy repair, and that's about a $2 or $3 part maybe. So assuming it's not something like a transformer or a blown speaker, something like that, most repairs that you're going to run into on discounted amplifiers, tube amps anyway, are going to be pretty simple fixes. Solid state, there's a little bit different story. There are a little bit more moving parts. That said, solid state amps are generally a lot more durable, and unless it's a broken knob or a blown speaker or something like that, I really generally don't see too much go wrong with them. Sometimes it's an input jack that just needs to be cleaned out, things of that nature. Oftentimes stores will put that stuff on clearance just because they don't want to deal with it. So that's oftentimes it's a good way to get a good price on a piece of gear that will carry a full manufacturer's warranty, by the way. A pretty simple, inexpensive repair. So these are things to keep in mind with when looking at amplifiers. With other gear, particularly like the pro audio and the recording stuff, that stuff you need to be a little bit more careful with if you're looking at buying clearance or B stock, open box studio gear and live sound, things like that, DJ gear. And the reason why is because you see that stuff go on clearance a little bit more often, because those companies are constantly coming out with new versions of the same thing. And again, when that happens, the old version is suddenly obsolete or no longer in demand, and it has to go on clearance in order for the stores to move through that inventory and make room for the new stuff. Technology moves very, very fast in those areas of the music business, and as I mentioned, those companies come out with new versions of the same thing all the time. It's almost to the point that they can't keep up with themselves. That's a good thing. It's good to see that technology is that fast-paced in that part of the industry, and you hear it all over recording. Software innovations, things like auto-tune and all the drum beats and things of that nature that are out there nowadays. Again, it's somebody's always trying to come out with something better and more advanced. And again, in that side of the industry, and with PA, live sound, stuff like that, it happens all the time. When I first started my Guitar Center career, there were still quite a few people in the industry, sound engineers, that were still relying on passive speaker cabinets and individual power amps to power that stuff. By the time I left, QSC had come out with their K-Series speakers, which were extremely high wattage, self-powered PA systems. They were smaller, they were lighter, they were self-powered, so you didn't have to lug a rack full of power amps around anywhere. And by the time I left, everybody was switching over to that stuff. And in the interim, after everybody saw QSC's success, JBL came out with a similar line, Yamaha came out with a similar line, even the Guitar Center brand Alto has come out with a couple of lines which were actually fantastic speakers for the price. They were competing very well against those. So we were just sitting on a huge pile of passive speakers that were literally collecting dust, because everybody in the live sound industry were all switching over to these new high-powered PA speakers that were more efficient power-wise, more efficient cost-wise, and overall just better for everybody. That's an example of how the industry, of how that side of the industry is constantly evolving and constantly turning over. I personally have been willing to take chances on a lot of B-stock gear, and I've had pretty good luck with it. Matter of fact, this Panama head that I do all my pedal demos through, and this new Panama cabinet that I just received were actually both B-stock cabinets, and I got fantastic deals on both of them. And not only did I get crazy deals on them, but looking them over, there is a small spot on the bottom of this amp where the piping is, this little silver or this little gold border that separates the two different colors of Tolex on the bottom of the amp that looks like it's just a little bit off, and you know, it's on the bottom anyway. So if that's what they consider B stock, then you know, I'm good with that. In the case of this cabinet, I looked it over up and down, inside out, and I've yet to find anything on it that would signify that this is a less than brand new speaker cabinet from Panama Guitars. So in the instance of Panama Guitars anyway, I have absolutely no fear whatsoever in buying their B stock gear, because I know I'm going to save a few bucks. It's in their best interest to move through it, because you know, they don't want it around in their inventory. I get a great deal, and I think it's fantastic gear. And again, to me, it's the exact same thing as it would have been had I paid, in this instance, you know, probably a couple $100 more than what I did. You know, in the instance of clearance gear, I typically, you know, I'm usually not afraid to buy clearance gear either with guitars. Again, I generally want to know what it is that I'm getting into, and if I'm buying from a store, if it's a store that's not local to me, I'll ask them to email me some pictures, just so I can kind of get an idea of what kind of condition it's really in. You know, see if they can tell me a little bit about it. In the instance of pedals, you know, I follow the pedal industry pretty closely enough that I've got a pretty good idea if it's discontinued, or you know, why it is that it's priced the way that it is. You know, in the case of open box gear, again, you know, with guitar players, I am one, so I understand how finicky we can be as a group. And not only do I understand that as the point of view of a guitar player, but I also understand that from standing on the other side of the counter from guitar players during my days at Guitar Center. Without going into those stories, I've heard people complain about all different kinds of things regarding guitars. So, you know, a guitar can be bought and returned for any number of reasons. Generally speaking, I'm pretty confident, you know, especially in the companies whose guitars I buy, I'm pretty confident in what it is that I'm getting. Assuming that there is an issue with it, the online retailers nowadays are very good about taking care of their customers and facilitating returns and shipping things back, that kind of thing. So it takes a little bit more time, but I'm able to do it all from my own home. Anyway, so I hope this video was helpful and informative. Please leave me your comments down below and let me know what your experiences are with buying these particular forms of discounted gear. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Any and all applicable links will be down in the description below. Thanks for watching. If you're watching this video, most likely you're a musician. Most musicians were inspired by an event at some point in their lives to want to play music. However, what if that event still occurred, but you had no means of your own to acquire your own instrument? There are thousands of people in your own community that would love to get involved in music, but do not have the means to afford their own instrument. Please donate your broken or unwanted gear to my friends at Share the Music, where Share the Music will take those instruments, refurbish them, and give them to somebody just like us, and help change their lives for the better.